The first thing you need to understand at the beginning of this documentary is rule number one of listening to Elizabeth Warren, is that you cannot trust anything that she says.
I've got more Indian blood in me than Pocahontas, and I have none.
They call her Pocahontas.
And Pocahontas was up, and she was so angry.
I'm going to get one of those little kits. We will say, I will give you $1 million to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian.
I'll only do it if I can test her personally. Okay, that will not be something I enjoy doing either.
The family lore. My Aunt Bee has walked by that picture at least 1,000 times, remarked that her father, my papa, had high cheekbones like all of the Indians do, because that's how she saw it. And she said, and your mother got those same great cheekbones, and I didn't. She thought this was the bad deal she had gotten in life.
How do you respond to people who think that regardless of the underlying facts, the way you handled the question of your Native American heritage was tone-deaf, offensive, and indicative of a lack of presidential tact?
Well, you know, I grew up in Oklahoma. I learned about my family from my family. And based on that, that's just kind of who I am. And I do the best I can with it. You know, there was an investigation. Nothing I ever did or my family played any role in any job I ever got.
So, folks, Elizabeth Warren ends up that CNN segment claiming that nothing I ever did or any of my family members ever did played any role in any job I ever got. Well, folks, I'm going to ask you right now, do you think Elizabeth Warren's telling the truth? But I'm going to answer it for you right now and back it up with a mountain of evidence. Elizabeth Warren's lying. And you have to realize before I present this evidence that during the 1990s, as she was climbing up the academic food chain in the 80s, a lot of these universities were under tremendous pressure to increase the diversity of their staff. Let's look at Exhibit 1, Elizabeth Warren's State Bar of Texas registration card. This is from April 1986. You can see Elizabeth Warren's filled out her information. Bottom left-hand corner, she has signed and dated it with her race put as American Indian. That was 1986. Exhibit 2, 10 years later, in the Fordham Law Review, Harvard Law School was noting, we didn't just hire our first Native American woman. They were touting Elizabeth Warren as their first woman of color at Harvard Law. I mean, how do African American and Hispanic women professors feel about that? That Elizabeth Warren is the woman who they're saying broke the color barrier and was the first woman of color on Harvard Law, Elizabeth Warren. And that was from a phone interview with a gentleman at Harvard, and they were touting it. Harvard was under tremendous pressure, we're about to see, for diversity quotas. Okay, Exhibit 3, another Ivy League school. This is just from 15 years ago, their Minority Equity Report. Understand, they're submitting this report to the Department of Labor showing that they're meeting diversity standards. Elizabeth Warren won an award called the Lindbeck Award in 1994. This report came out in 2005. You'll see all minorities are listed in bold and italics in this report. And sure enough, Elizabeth Warren is still listed in 1990 for her 1994 award, but this is from 2005 when the report came out. There's Elizabeth Warren. Bold and italics, person of color getting their award in 1994. Okay, and finally we're going to go to Exhibit 4. 1996, Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper, wrote an article. There was huge protests on the campus about the lack of diversity. They had 71 current full-time law school professors, and assistant professors. In 96, and this article from October 96 is talking about how the law students were unhappy with the lack of diversity. You can see, look, one is Native American. They're like, hold on, no. There's 11 women on the staff. Look at this. 11 women, 5 black people, 1 Hispanic, and 1 Native American. That's what Mark Chimura, their spokesman from Harvard, is saying. So if you're wondering what Native Americans and Cherokees actually think about Elizabeth Warren, let me tell you, they're not happy. Check out this interview with Cherokee writer and activist Rebecca Nagel.
She caused. And what we have left to see her do is to admit that the story that she grew up with as a child was wrong. You know, a lot of white people, especially people from Oklahoma, have stories of a distant Cherokee ancestor that when you look into it, when you do someone's genealogy, it's just not true. And what is true about Warren's family, specifically her mother's side of the family, the part of her family that she says is Cherokee, not only were they not Cherokee, but at different points in history were people who participated in the dispossession of Cherokee land. So, you know, sovereignty. And so for the people that she's saying were Cherokee in her family tree, to not only there be no evidence that they're Cherokee, but when we look into it, we research who these people are and what they did, for them to have participated in the dispossession of Cherokee land and Cherokee sovereignty, I think it's really wrong for her to not correct that narrative. And so that's...
So why does this matter? It matters because there's over 500,000 people just like Elizabeth Warren, and she's just the most visible, who are stealing opportunities from actual Indians and people of color.
Well, the truth is that there are hundreds of thousands of other people with stories like hers that are taking resources that are actually have been set aside, not just for Native Americans, but for other people of color. You know, I think the reason that I'm concerned with what Elizabeth Warren says is because Elizabeth Warren is not alone. You know, on the last U.S. Census, more people wrote down that they were Cherokee. Twice as many people wrote down that they are Cherokee than who are enrolled in our 3 Cherokee tribes. That's 500,000 people. You know, in June, the LA Times reported that, you know, some of these people who claim to be Cherokee with a distant relative but don't have any evidence of it actually got $30 million, over $30 million in no-bid federal contracts. So people who are otherwise white but have a story of Cherokee ancestry, they're not enrolled in a tribe, they have no relationship to Cherokee people, are getting contracts set aside not just for Native Americans, but also for other people of color. And so I think it is a really big issue that Elizabeth Warren is just the most public example of.
All right, so now we're going to get into Powwow Chow. This is my favorite, hilarious part. She submitted this, Elizabeth Warren. This is a hand-me-down cookbook you can see from 5 different tribes. This is supposed to be passed down recipes. She's submitting ridiculous recipes like herbed tomatoes and claiming Cherokee heritage throughout the cookbook. This was her cousin's cookbook. And This is the worst thing. She submits a recipe, cold omelets with crab meat. Now, not only, this is someone running for president here, a Harvard law professor. She's proposing that not only did Native American, her Cherokee ancestors, master the art of French cooking omelets in Oklahoma, 100 years from she was born, she's also proposing that they got in canoes and they traveled 200 miles. Now, I lived in Texas right there. You can get to the river and you could travel down river, get yourself some and build some crab meat. They had no competition, get some crabs pretty quick. The problem is getting the crabs back when no ice machines existed anywhere on the route. There was no ice. I don't know if you've ever had seafood before, but you can't. And they were going upriver. So they had to carry the canoes. They had to abandon the canoes, bring the crabs up. Without any ice, they were going to smell. How could they make cold omelets with crab meat, master the art of French cooking, and get crabs 800 miles round trip from the Gulf of Mexico? Elizabeth Warren, if that wasn't even worse, she copied the article word for word from this guy from the New York Times. She copied the recipe. She claimed Cherokee heritage, copied the recipe, cold omelets with crab meat, half the ingredients, and literally word for word down to a 7-inch Teflon pan. She's saying Native Americans had Teflon pans, learned the art of French cooking. This guy was the head chef at Le Bec Fin, one of the most famous restaurants in the world. That was Cole Porter, the famous jazz musician, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's favorite meal, cold omelets with crab meat. She's saying that Native Americans mastered the art of French cooking, traveled into the future, took a time machine, learned this recipe from this famous chef at Le Bec Fin who invented the recipe in the 1900s for Cole Porter, the jazz musician, traveled back in time, got crabs when they only had canoes, went upstream. She's so full of shit. I just said upwind because she's like blowing farts out of her mouth. She's so full of shit at this point. I mean, you think that's bad? Oh, it gets worse. Her husband, look at this, Oriental beef stir fry. This is from Powwow Chow. And is that not an insulting name? Powwow Chow. He's so lazy. This is the whitest guy in the world. Submits Oriental beef stir fry. He claims Cherokee heritage. This guy's whiter than a Q-tip. If Casper the Friendly Ghost and a golf ball had sex, the kid would be less white than Bruce Mann. And this white guy claims Cherokee heritage in Powwow Chow, and he's so intellectually lazy and fraudulent or stupid or just doesn't care. That's so insulting if you're an actual Native American. He submits Oriental beef stir fry as a recipe to Powwow Chow. Are you kidding me? This asshole is proposing that Native Americans, his ancestors, traveled across the Pacific Ocean to the Orient. I mean, I'm out of breath. I'm so angry. Look at this. Here, they probably just stopped at Japan. I know. I have the Orient right there. Okay. Saying they mastered the art of stir fry. Oh, and they brought back soy sauce and ginger. And they were in canoes, right? They traveled the arduous Pacific route twice to bring back a wok and stir fry. Or they took a lot of peyote. Here I animate if they took a lot of peyote and just melted time and all the continents collapsed.